you all have any comments, please do remember to use your microphones and speak into them. I would like to take a moment to welcome our newest member, Ms. Rosalind Oglesby from Franklin. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself, as you did at the last meeting, for those that didn't hear already?
As you stated, I'm Rosalind Oglesby, the new city manager for the city of Franklin. I look forward to working with her.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval or modification of the agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, takes us to item number 3, which is the fiscal year end 2024 audit financial statement. Mr. Crum, would you like to kick that off?
Yes. Before you today is our audit and report from fiscal year 2024. With us today is Thomas Capstick from PB Mayors, who is our auditor who completed our audit for the organization for the past fiscal year. Just as an FYI, your Personnel and Budget Committee did receive this report in detail this morning and accepted the report. This is an action item where we will be asking the HRPDC to accept the audited financial statements today. So Thomas, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Good afternoon, everybody. Finances. I know it's right after lunch. It's exactly what we want to be talking about. So I will try to make this quick. So my name is Thomas Capstick. I'm an audit manager with PB Mayors here in our Norfolk office, and I'm the manager on the HRPDC engagement. Before we get into the financial statements themselves, just, quick shout out to Sheila and her team for just all the hard work and all the diligent, and timely responses to us and just attention to detail, not only this year, but, I think I've worked with Sheila for 8 years now, and it's been a pleasure every year. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. So our team, we did the HRPDC financial statement audit, the compliance audit, as well as the VRS attestation engagement. The opinions for all 3 of those engagements were unmodified. That's the opinion you're looking for. That's the best opinion you can have. We had no audit adjustments, no deficiencies, no issues with management performing the audit. It's pretty much your textbook audit, how you want it to go. So again, we appreciate management and Sheila for all the help there. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so we did review this morning, and we're very pleased that it was a clean audit. And with that, I'd like to open it up for any conversations or questions for the auditor. Hearing none, would somebody like to move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that passes. I was just going to say, as Tom mentioned, this was Sheila's last audit, and we're all very proud to have another year of clean audit. But I just wanted to take a moment, as I said this morning, it's a relief for me as chair to know that Sheila has been behind us working day in and day out to make sure that our financial policies and procedures are adhered to and does a great job overall. And I know that she's looking forward to retirement. And so I know that next month or November will be your last meeting. We'll have more celebration then.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. We're going to give Sheila a proper recognition at the November meeting. Mr. Chairman, I would just like to add one more comment onto Sheila's great work. Not only has she delivered once again for the 8th straight year a clean audit for the PDC and TPO, but our friends in Isle of Wight County, in Suffolk, and in Southampton County will know that we're also the project manager and fiscal agent for a pretty aggressive last mile broadband build out project. It's a project of over $40 million. And with any grant program, you receive specific audits for those type of projects. A number of PDCs across the Commonwealth received those monies. I'm incredibly proud. This PDC is the only one that had a clean audit on their body project, and that's because of Sheila Wilson. So. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend that the commission take action to accept our audited financial statements.
We did.
Okay. My apologies. I got too emotional with Sheila there. I told her I wouldn't do that.
So that takes us to public comment. Do we have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, we do not. Would anybody in the audience like to address the commission today? Seeing none, back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, since there are none, I'll send it back to you for the executive director's report.
Very good. Just a couple of items. As you came into the room today, you saw up in the screen some of the HRPDC social media information. If you're not following our HRPDC Facebook page, Brian Thrower, I see you shaking your head. Thank you. You're a frequent visitor, I know. But please consider following our HRPDC Facebook page. Our team, it's really kept up to date. It's really dynamic. Our team is seeing a significant increase in followers. It's a great way to stay up to date on regional efforts. And I would also ask if you can start sharing that with your constituents. It's just a great way to get the word out about regional efforts that are ongoing. So would ask for your help and assistance there. Mr. Chairman, really exciting day today to introduce some new staff members that have joined the HRPDC in the past several months. I'm going to have 4 of them to introduce today. And I might ask if you'd hold your applause to the end. And as I introduce the staff, if you could remain standing, I'd like to give them all a great welcome at the end. But first off, I'd like to ask Tammy Summer to stand, please. So Tammy, back of the room. Tammy comes to us to join our emergency management team, working under John Sadler as our grants and project manager. She began with us on July 1st. She's assisting in the application management and implementation of regional emergency management and homeland security grants and projects. She has over 30 years of experience in emergency management. We're incredibly fortunate to add her to our team. She is well known and respected by many in the emergency management community. Tammy's worked with the Virginia Department of Environmental Emergency Management. She came to us from Christopher Newport University and also has worked with the University of Richmond. So we're super excited to have Tammy join. I'm sorry, Tammy, you're gonna have to stay there since you went first. But if you could, we'll ask everybody to stay standing and recognize you all at once. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Toe Tran to the commission. Toe? So Toe will support Eric Wahlberg in our regional planning department. He's working on a wide range of initiatives that you'll hear more about, like our regional strategic plan, economic planning issues around economic development, environmental planning issues and challenges. He comes to us from TMG Consulting in New Orleans. So I think he knows a little bit about flooding, right? But when he was in New Orleans, he actively contributed to the city's housing program assessment. So we're really excited to learn his thoughts and viewpoints. Our housing program added Colette Ricks. Colette joined us on August the 1st. She's going to be working with Sharnita Bethay, as you all know, who runs our housing program. Colette is processing and working in support of administrative activities associated with the home program and other housing related programs. Before she came to us, Colette was a treasury management customer service specialist with M&T Bank out of Buffalo, New York. So really excited to have Colette here. And certainly, last but not least, Jeff Descala. Jeff is our grant support specialist, started here on October the 1st. So he's just been with us a couple of weeks and has already hit the ground running with a lot of energy. Jeff's going to help support our organization as we continue to bring in grant money to the region. Some to support our program, some to pass through to you all as localities. The PDC and TPO are involved in just a variety of programs. As you can imagine, none of them are the same. Jeff, I think you've already figured that out, right? All have different requirements, different reporting requirements, etc. So we're really happy to have Jeff to help us through this. Before Jeff joined the PDC, he was the grants administrator for the California Natural Resources Agency in Sacramento, California. So could we all give all of our new staff members a Thank you so much and welcome everybody. And I hope you all get a chance to talk to them. They're really great people that we're excited to add to the team. Mr. Chairman, my final item will be a brief report from Katie Collifer from our environmental plant education department. Katie's going to talk to you about a day without water.
After this.
So for our citizens, a day without water would be frustrating at most. You can't wash your dishes, you can't take a shower for that day. For the fire department, a day without water would present unbelievable challenges. It would hinder, it would hurt our operations. We would ultimately find a way, but a day without water for us is a bad day.
I can really imagine if we didn't have water for a day on campus, even personally from the water I drink for my morning workout to what I use to shower and brush my teeth and make breakfast, and even just the water that's used to sustain all of the buildings that we live and learn in.
A day without water would remove the purpose of many of our water departments. There are utility contractors. Everything they do would not have water to throw, wastewater to flow through, and would not be able to service the end user, which is each one of us.
I think a reliable water supply is perhaps our most important utility at the university. We are already in the process of considering going greener, so we're looking at some of our other utilities like electric and how we can maybe use alternatives, solar and so, but there is no alternative for water.
A day without water for us would be unproductive.
A day without water would be detrimental.
A day without water would be challenging.
I can't imagine a day without water.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Katie Cullifer, and I'm trying to make this brief, but today happens to be Imagine Day Without Water. It's the 10th annual day of recognition to that end. And so I wanted to just ask that we could pause and take a minute to consider what life would be like without, that basic water services that we often take for granted. It's timely to think that imagining a day without water is not far-fetched for our neighbors just in Western North Carolina. I have, on a personal note, some family that lives just outside of Asheville, and they're on day 21 without water access. Thankfully, they have the resources to go to a local hotel every couple of days for a shower. And the way the community is coming together there to rebuild is certainly encouraging. But today, we get the chance to come together here in Hampton Roads to support people right here who might face the reality of losing their water services because they're struggling with a financial hardship. And that's where the Help to Others program comes into the picture. Help to Others is a program for everyone. It's not income based, which makes it really unique. Anyone who's going through a financial emergency or hardship, a loss of a job, an illness, death of a family member, is eligible to apply for up to $500 in assistance to pay their water, wastewater, or HRSD bill. And that's what makes it unique. And to date, since 2012, we've been able to provide almost $1 million in assistance to families right here in Hampton Roads. We've been working together through the PDC in close partnership with HRSD and the Salvation Army to administer this program, which means that there are no overhead costs or expenses that have to be paid from the donations that are collected. Every single cent that is donated by the community goes directly to helping a local family in need with their water or wastewater utility bill. There are not many nonprofit organizations that could make that claim. So today I just wanted to, again, take a little time to reflect and also, it's an option and an opportunity for us to take action by supporting the Help to Others program here in Hampton Roads. This is probably the biggest QR code you'll ever see in this room. And if you want to scan it with your phone, you can make a donation today. You can also go to the shareh2o.org website and donate anytime. I would ask that you share this program and information with your constituents in your localities, your friends, your family members, and ask for their support as well for this important program. Our hope is that we get enough funding that we don't have to turn families away in between donation periods, that we would be able to provide assistance to anyone that needs help. And so we would love your support to that end. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the report, and you're absolutely right. It is timely when we consider those nearest that don't have water. And so I was particularly taken by the fact that this is a charity that 100% of the proceeds go to help families. And so please do spread the word and use that QR code, Mr. Goodell-Trosky. Okay, anything else, Mr. Crum?
No, sir, that completes my report.
Okay, takes us now to item 6, which is the Community Advisory Committee. Sir?
Everywhere all at once. Good afternoon. The Community Advisory Committee met a week ago in the iconic Mariners Museum in Newport News. Our two main topics were the regional legislative packet that you will be considering, and a rethinking of recycling. I had a question last time. We were being briefed on the program that the region is doing with grant money received from the federal government. We were not actually contemplating any position or policy on recycling, but that will probably come later.
Thank you. Any questions? Moving on to consent agenda, Mr. Crum.
Yes, your consent agenda is included in your agenda today. Other than the meeting minutes and treasurer's report, we are asking for approval to accept some Homeland Security grants on your behalf and directing me to execute those contracts. We are also asking for your authorization to apply for a couple of Community Flood Preparedness Fund grant applications. Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that the commission take action to approve today's consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Does anybody have any questions regarding any of these items? I see a microphone on down here. Nope. All right, saving those. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you so much. All in favor? Any opposition? Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, I believe we have a guest speaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I normally try not to read, but I won't read the entire bio of Mr. Swartz. It's in the agenda package for today, but I would like to set the stage for today's conversation. So incredibly excited to welcome to the HRPDC Mr. Matthew Swartz. Mr. Swartz serves as the Executive Director and Chief of Staff for the U.S. Fleet Forces Command. Mr. Swartz assumed these duties in 2019. He is a direct report to the 4-star Fleet Commander and is responsible for integrating resources and readiness fleet-wide, developing strategies to optimize the utilization of more than 15 billion, that's with a B, annually, as well as 125,000 total active duty and reserve military members, civilian employees, and contractors. Back last spring, Greg Grutendorf and I had the opportunity to sit with Mr. Swartz and visit he and his team. And we were just really motivated by his discussions and his ideas about how the military in our region could work together across that fence line to support our military partners, which are so important to our economy, but so important to our national security. So HRPDC members, would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Matthew Swartz?
All right, is this, the mic is on. Bob, thanks for that introduction, and thanks for the opportunity, and for the members of the PDC, thanks for the opportunity and for your time today to spend a few minutes to talk with me about the United States Navy. My goal here is to maybe paint the Navy in a little bit of a different perspective than maybe what you traditionally think about when you think about the Navy, and give you a different lens to think about who we are and what we represent. But then also give you a little bit of insights in terms of what your Navy from this region is doing today in current real world operations, and give you a little bit of a what's happening and where your citizens, sailors are currently operating around the globe. But before I jump into it, I just want to say congrats on the clean audit. I will tell you that since I've been in this job, I have been working on an audit for the Navy for many years, and it is quite challenging, especially when you're talking about a budget just in that we manage here in Norfolk of about 15 billion. I do about 27,000 contracting actions annually across our organization, which is pretty sizable. And then procuring different types of support services ranging in to about $3 to $4 billion. So pretty sizable. And we've been chasing that audit opinion for quite some time. So congratulations on achieving that. That is a huge victory. And I realize the amount of work that it takes to do that. And also, as a Navy member, I cannot envision a day without water. We operate on the water and we rely on water. And outstanding brief on that. And but those two topics really resonate with me. Again, just thanks for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. But my goal here today is to, and so for some folks in the audience, you have seen parts of my pitch. I've added a little bit to it to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what's happening right now around the world. And ultimately, I wanted to give you that update because those are your sailors. Those are your citizens that live in your districts. Those are folks that are on your PTA boards, that are soccer coaches, that folks that own homes in your area. And I wanted to show you what they're actually doing right now and what this nation is asking of them and the sacrifices that they're making. Many times people don't realize the sailors in the Navy that you see in the news every night are actually residents of this region, the residents from your districts. And so I want to show you what they're dealing with and also have some asks in terms of how we support them going forward. But my goal today is to give you a little bit of a view of the United States Navy through a business lens and through an economic lens. So you don't just see us as the national security provider that we are. And I know thinking about the military can be big and daunting in terms of the missions that we execute. But I wanted to give you a view of the Navy, specifically in this region, from an economic perspective and from a business perspective. Prior to this role, I spent a lot of time in industry and was part of growing businesses, starting businesses. So bring a little bit of a business mindset. Folks ask, why is there a civilian reporting directly to the four-star admiral responsible for fleet operations and homeland security defense around the globe? And the reason is because we are like a massive business. We are a large corporation that we have to run every day. We have payroll, we have HR, we have IT, we have all those things in addition to executing the missions and driving the gray holes that you see on the news around every day. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a view of the United States lens, of the United States Navy through that business lens. What I put up here is a little bit of a snapshot of what a comparison view of 3 Fortune 100 corporations. And I know in this region, we're thinking about economic growth. We think about trying to lure headquarters and organizations in this region to grow this region economically and drive this region in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So I want to give you a little bit of a view of 3 Fortune 100 companies. But ultimately, what I want to show you is the one in the middle. If you look at all of the elements that we use as a nation to evaluate Fortune 100 companies in terms of size, in terms of number of employees, in terms of types of employees, in terms of missions that they execute, in terms of training needs that they have, and then services that we have to provide those employees. And all those measures, if you were to evaluate the United States Navy, we would actually be number 10 on the Fortune 100 list. Most people don't view us in that lens. They don't view us as a corporation or an organization like that. But if you were to evaluate us against those same exact metrics that we evaluate large corporations against, we would be ranked number 10. And we have a lot of the same challenges and a lot of the same goals that these same corporations have in terms of workforce growth, retention, all those types of things, and where we're getting those services and those employees from. And I'll talk about that here in a second as well. But the other piece that I wanted to highlight is, so that's let me go back actually. So that's a global view of the United States Navy holistically in terms of the Navy that's around the globe. For this region specifically, if you were to look at just the budget that I manage on behalf of Admiral Cottle. So just the resources that are flowing into Hampton roads, into all your districts. And if you were to measure those dollars in GDP, in gross domestic product, in terms of the economic contribution to this region, if you were to look at it from an economics perspective, we would be number 117 on the GDP list. We would be the 117th largest nation on the face of the globe. Just the resources and dollars that are executed in this region. That's the economic contribution that the United States Navy provides to this region in terms of the dollars that flow in. And I'll talk a little bit in a second in terms of how those dollars do flow in. But ultimately, that's the size and the magnitude of the fleet and all the support elements operating inside of the Hampton Roads region. So I ask you to think about that in terms of our relationship and also some of the benefits that that relationship can bring to this region as the economic bedrock for this foundation. The United States Navy is never going anywhere. Right, so some of those corporations that you see on this slide, they move. They have different motivations. They may relocate, they grow, they shrink based on the economic conditions globally in the global markets. The United States Navy is not going anywhere anytime soon, and I don't envision that the United States Navy is going to get smaller anytime soon. In fact, the demand signal that I have in this region is growing rapidly to include the continued growth of the Joint Forces NATO Command here in Norfolk. That's going to triple to quadruple in size over the next couple of years in terms of the number of folks that are moving to this region. So I want to talk a little bit about why in Navy, and then I'll go into a little bit about what's happening today around the globe. Talking about a day without water. So a couple of those metrics in terms of why it's so important to have a United States Navy. Of all the armed services, we're the one service that's directed in the Constitution that we must have a Navy. We have to have a standing Navy, and that's defined in the Constitution. But if you look at the reason why, and the population of the globe that's surrounded by water, which these metrics specifically talk to this region in terms of the types of areas that we represent, and then also the types of commerce that move in and out of this region. If you think about the Port of Norfolk, the amount of commercial movements, global economic shipments that flow through this region, that defines who we are. Not just from a corporate perspective, but also why there is the United States Navy. And that's driving a lot of things that we do and a lot of things that we think about. Many times we take for granted the fact that the United States Navy is there to ensure that we're protecting those transit routes across the globe. And I'll talk about that here in a second in terms of where we're operating today. But just another quick side picture in terms of the world that we're in now compared to the world where we were before. The green ring represents what our perceptions were in terms of the threats to the homeland about 30 years ago. The United States, one of our best defense mechanisms is that we're surrounded by moats, and those moats are known as oceans, right? So our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the south, right? They're not huge threats to the United States of America. And then we have two large bodies of water on either side of us. So we're protected from a geography perspective. But the reality of the matter, the threats to the homeland are growing and rising daily. Our adversaries are developing kinetic capabilities that they can reach our shores today. And in fact, we're seeing the number of our adversaries that are operating off our coast on a daily basis increasing rapidly to where we have China and Russia vessels that are operating around our coast, and they're holding us at risk on a daily basis. That is growing, and that's more persistent than it's ever been. And it's something that that we are accountable for here at Fleet Forces Command. My boss, Admiral Cottle, wears 3 hats. And many folks don't realize that. So he is responsible for man training and equipping the forces that you see operating around the globe today. But he also has direct responsibilities to Strategic Command and also Northern Command. From a Strategic Command perspective, here in Norfolk, we're responsible for ensuring that we're maintaining and operating the strategic nuclear deterrent, waterborne nuclear deterrent on behalf of the President of the United States. And that's one of the responsibilities that he owns. But he's also responsible for Homeland Defense to ensure that that we're protecting the waterways against a threat and adversary. And so now when we view this, we look at it from a threat almost at the yellow ring, that our adversaries now have the ability to touch our coast with capabilities that they've developed kinetically, then also in terms of what we call gray threats, which could be cyber actors and those types of adversaries. But the threat ring continues to grow, and that's something that we're thinking about on a regular basis. What I wanted to put up here, this is a picture that's collected from open source. I don't want to put any classified information up there. But this is the presence that the United States Navy has and continues to have in the Middle East. And so ultimately what you see here is a number of U.S. vessels operating in the Mediterranean. You'll see the Red Sea is not occupied there, but there has been movements in and out, of course, that I know you guys are all tracking. All those resources and all those platforms are generated from Norfolk. So those are assets generated from your region. Those are constituents from your area. Those are capabilities that we're generating in Norfolk that we're pushing forward. You could ask why we're doing that and the things that we're trying to protect. Up in the upper right-hand quadrant or left-hand quadrant of the slide, sorry, that is the number of attacks that have happened on commercial vessels in that region since the original attacks. And that number continues to grow. So pretty significant in terms of the number of attacks that we've seen on commercial vessels. Ultimately, global economic impacts associated with attacks in the Red Sea, and then also attacks in the Gulf around that area in the Middle East. And so that's one of the things that we're responsible for as the United States Navy, is ensuring that we're protecting global commerce and global economic values around the world. I want to rattle off a couple of things that we've done in that region since we've deployed. Again, these are your forces that have deployed forward to be able to support this mission. Since we've deployed, we've flown over 13,000 sorties. So that's 13,000 aircraft sorties. We've flown over 30,000 flying hours. And that's either monitoring the environment or actually engaging in some type of kinetic engagement with one of our adversaries, whether it be Houthis unmanned vehicles or other missiles that are being launched at our vessels or these commercial vessels. So 13,000 sorties, 30,000 flight hours. During that time, we've also, each of the platforms that you saw on the previous slide operating as part of that carrier strike group, they've actually traversed over 65,000 nautical miles up and down this area in this AOR since the original attacks, which is pretty significant. We have shot over 80 air-to-air missiles, and that's usually in response to a counter threat, whether that be an inbound kinetic attack on one of our vessels or a commercial vessel, or an unmanned vehicle that's been turned into a weapon. But over 80 air-to-air missiles. We fired over 350 air-to-surface weapons since this time, and also over 100 Tomahawks. And I share that with you in terms of our responsibilities to protect global commerce, our responsibilities to ensure that our partners around the globe are safe. But again, I want to highlight, those are actions and things that are being executed in that AOR from your citizens. That's your population base. That's sailors that live here in Hampton Roads, that live in your districts. And they have needs and things that they're looking for to ensure that their families are safe while they're deployed. The carrier strike group that I mentioned, that I showed the picture of earlier, they were on a 7-month deployment. So they deployed from this region. They were deployed for 7 months executing this mission. They are operating in harm's way today. And it's something that we need to think about in terms of how do we support them while they're operating forward, protecting our freedoms. But I just want to give you a little bit of a glimpse. When you're seeing this in the news, what's actually happening and where those sailors are coming from and why it's so important to this region in terms of where they do come from and what they represent. So a little bit of a view in terms of the global economic impact of U.S. Fleet Forces Command and our subordinate commands in this region. And I want to draw your attention to the upper left-hand quadrant of this slide. So this is the economic impact. This is the 117th largest GDP, if I was measured that way, that's operating in your backyard. This is what I believe to be the economic bedrock of Hampton Roads. Of the budgets that I execute, you'll see up there $16 billion on an annual basis. $13 billion of payroll. So that's labor dollars. And that could be a payroll to sailors, civilians, and contractors that are being injected into this region on an annual basis. $13 billion of payroll. Contracts, I put that up there. Those are contracts that are being executed in this region. Why that's important is because those are small businesses in Hampton Roads and in many of your districts. Those are dollars that are flowing from the United States Navy into our contractor base, into small businesses and medium-sized businesses in this region that we pump in economically. Per diem's interesting. I like putting that one up there, but you may ask why. But ultimately, if this region relies on our hotels, restaurants, those types of services, per diem, what that is that's paying for hotel rooms. That's paying for visits to restaurants. For folks that are coming into this region, executing their Navy mission, they are also consuming those same type of hospitality services that we also rely on during the warm months. But those are the dollars from an economic perspective that flow into this region. So I put this slide up, um, especially in these types of engagements, to, to perhaps spark a question about, what is this region known for? Um, and how do we think of ourselves? Do we think of ourselves as a maritime region? Do we take credit for hosting and having the world's largest naval base that is right in your backyard? And so what are we known for and what are we doing? And I put this up there because there's many challenges that I have to be able to execute my mission that I depend on many of you to provide. Like you, I have many of the same challenges from a quality of service perspective, and that includes providing broadband Wi-Fi services to our sailors who are assigned to ships in the maintenance period and our shipyards who are trying to be able to FaceTime home to their parents. Right, we're talking about sailors just like many of us have young kids, 18, 19 years old, first time away from home. They're on a ship in a shipyard, very industrial environment. They don't have access to quality Wi-Fi broadband services. And so some of those same quality of service types of things that you're trying to do in your districts are things that we're trying to build capabilities for our sailors as well. And when I think about quality of service, I think about young families, young sailor families. Childcare is a massive issue for the United States Navy. Globally, the United States Navy had 10,000 dependents waiting on childcare services across our entire enterprise. Over the last year or so, we've been really working that hard and also working that hard here in Hampton Roads. And we've been able to reduce that down to about 3,800 dependents still waiting for services. Lots of partnerships. We've done some partnerships here locally with the Armed Forces YMCA on identifying opportunities to increase the child care population and accessibility to child care services. And we're also doing things to attract child care providers in terms of how do we attract them into some of our CDCs that we have here in the United States Navy. But those are types of things that we think about. Access to medical care is also a challenge that we have, not just for our military members, but also for our civilians, our shipyard workers, massive population of folks. And one of the things that keeps them here, ensures that we're able to keep that talent, is the ability to have access to affordable and access to quantity of medical services that they need. You probably read a lot about mental health and mental health services that we're trying to provide as well. But access to those things are things that I'm looking for, but not only support me, but I think they support other partners inside this region. Affordable housing is a significant issue for us, something that we need to think about. And on the military side, there's things that we can do with entitlements that we provide our military members to ensure that they have the resources necessary to identify and get housing. But for our civilian workforce, our workers in the shipyards who may not be able to have access to affordable housing and may not get those same incentives, are we providing them access to affordable housing and ensuring that they have the appropriate transportation to get back and forth to work? Again, this goes back to I have payroll dollars. I'm just looking for opportunities to try to attract those folks into this region. And then also things that, one of the things that I think about pretty regularly, and it's actually a quote and a question that was asked of General Mattis years ago in a forum that I was able to participate in. And it was a foreign flag officer in this forum who asked General Mattis a question. And this question was, why was the United States known as the world's greatest fighting force? And how have they retained that capability over time? And his answer to that question was, once a Marine, always a Marine. And in that room, everybody kind of chuckled a little bit because, the Marines are the Marines. But then he provided some clarity in terms of what he meant by that. He said, when a Marine goes forward into combat or goes into harm's way, there's one thing that they know. And when you say once a Marine, always a Marine, what that means is that Marine's family and that individual is always going to have a support system that's there to support them. So when they go into conflict, the only thing they have to think about is their ability to execute their mission. They don't have to think about whether or not their spouse is going to have the appropriate support back home. They don't have to think about if their spouse and their kids run into a challenge, whether or not the other families around them are going to rally to support them. They don't have to think about whether or not that Marine installation that's surrounded by a community that supports the Marine Corps is going to be there to support them. Once a Marine, always a Marine means that everybody is there to support them. They can focus on executing the mission. They can rely on the community that surrounds them to provide them their services so they can focus on what they're doing. And this gets back to the picture I showed you, right? So I showed you the picture of those ships, those sailors operating forward right now in the Red Sea and in the Med. Those are all folks that call Hampton Roads home. Those are all folks, many of them have left partners home. They still have children that are going to our schools. And they are operating forward in harm's way. And they are asking themselves whether or not the United States Navy and whether or not this community is providing their families everything that they need so they don't have to worry about the well-being of their families as they're executing their mission. So I think this is an amazing forum, and I really thank you for the opportunity. And I'm not challenging that we're not doing that. I just ask that when you guys perform your jobs every day and the great work that you do, to remember those thousands of sailors who call this location home, who are operating forward today. And let's ask ourselves, are their kids being taken care of? Are their spouses being taken care of? Do they have to worry about those things while this nation asks them to ensure the global economic and the freedoms that we enjoy are being executed around the globe? Are we doing our part to support them, to provide them those services? And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks for your time today. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I don't believe anybody in this room takes for granted the value of the Navy and the military in general in our region. I think it's striking to see those numbers. And those, as Mr. Schwartz pointed out, those are dollars being reinvested in our communities, in our businesses. And I hope that we all do work together to support our military folks in this region. And so with that, I would like to open the floor for any comments or questions for Mr. Schwartz. Yes, ma'am.
Well, first of all, as a representative of the city of Norfolk, thank you. I appreciate a couple shout outs there. You know, one of the things that we as a region are challenged by is doing exactly what you said, which is providing the resources to make a good quality of life, including working on our roads, working on flooding, working on schools. So we were really excited about the Defense Access Road Act and DSIP and the opportunity to have the DoD community help support our communities, because we only have what we have through taxes. And when we have bases that don't pay taxes, it is a drag on us as well. So to the extent that we can work together to expand and support those programs where the DoD can provide finances outside of the gates, that will help us do exactly what you have asked us to do as well. So I appreciate your support there as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Mr. Dyer.
Thank you. And sir, as a jarhead, thank you for the shout out. Appreciate it. But, you know, Harumpha went to the Pentagon a little while ago, and almost every branch of the service that we accommodate with Harumpha, we spoke to every undersecretary or assistant secretary of defense and emphasized that housing was critical to the mission. And, but once again, you know, it's a challenge that we face, and it's one that we have to confront. But when you spoke to Harumpha recently, you also brought up the fact that if we do go into a conflict situation, that this region was going to be inundated with military personnel, you know, coming here. Could you touch upon that?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, sir. It's great to see you again, and thanks for the question. You know, one of the things that we're planning for right now, and I'm sure many of you have read articles or different position pieces on the state of global relationships and the threat that some of our adversaries pose. We do believe that there's high probability that within at least my lifetime that we will engage at some level of sustained conflict with one of our adversaries, and we have to plan and be prepared for that. But as we think about that and we talk about conflict with one of those adversaries, it's not something that we have seen within the last 5, 10, 20 years. We're talking about sustained conflict with a peer adversary, which most likely will be a long, drawn-out proposition. And with that, the ability for us, what we call operating as a varsity away team, meaning that we are sitting off the coast defending our freedoms, we're going to be engaged in conflict, which will ultimately mean that the maintenance enterprise that we rely on today to get our forces forward, we're going to have to rely on those same forces to reconstitute our military capability and get it back out into the fight as rapidly as possible. So think 1945, think the relationship between the national security enterprise and industry to make sure that we can be in sustained conflict for a long period of time, then ultimately achieve our military and global our aspirations. And so with that, If we're going to do that, it's going to rely a lot, I believe, on this community to be able to do that and meet that mission. And with that, it's increased maintenance requirements and it's increased ability to get our ships repaired and get them back out into the fleet, the ability to train our sailors and get them certified to be able to execute their missions with high proficiency. And that is going to require an influx of resources and capabilities into Hampton Roads to be able to maintain that op tempo. And so we're thinking through that right now in terms of what does that mean in terms of folks that would come to this region, and then also whether or not the industrial capacity and the partnership capacity inside this region can sustain and support that. But I do envision that there will be a massive influx of resources, because with conflict, as we all know, with conflict comes money. And then so the real hard question is, if we have the resources, can we execute it? And will we have the community resources to be able to support it? And that is housing, and not just affordable housing within all of our districts, but it's accessibility of housing. In our region, transportation becomes such a critical aspect in terms of having accessible housing in the places where most of our concentration areas are in this region. And I think if you look at it right now, although we have housing challenges, accessible housing to where we need it is a challenge. But I do, sir, envision that there will be a massive increase of demand on this region, and then it'll be whether or not the region can respond when called upon. And housing is just one of many of those items.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. My name is Josh Schulman. I'm from the city of Virginia Beach. If I'm not mistaken, I think I may be the only Jewish city council person in all of Hampton Roads, although you all may be able to correct me on that topic. And I'd be remiss if I didn't just acknowledge the fact that a year ago, almost October 7th, there was obviously a terrorist attack in Israel that precipitated a lot of the activity that we're seeing right now. And I really appreciate you mentioning that, because it's difficult for us as local governments, because as I'm sure you all know, open mic, people come and they speak to us, and you want to be as caring and compassionate as you possibly can. And the the loss of innocent life on for any family in any nation is in any community is horrible. But you rightfully pointed out something that I try to explain to people, is that we are a nation that is 250 years young, and we are surrounded by allies and oceans. And the state of Israel is surrounded by, for the most part, enemies, and has been attacked on all fronts on multiple occasions on its highest holy days. So I wanted to, on my behalf, on behalf of the Jewish community, I wanted to say thank you to the Navy for defending our democracy in the region. And I also want to say thank you to the other local governments in our region who have, and our council and our mayor, for standing strong in the face of some really challenging rhetoric. And I think we all understand how, even though it's an international conflict, it really is brought home here, because these are our friends, our neighbors that are putting themselves in harm's way, and the families that are here supporting them. And I want to just say thank you to everybody for your support in that regard.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Schwartz? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Joel Laker, we met earlier from Isle of Wight County. Having been born and raised in this region, we all understand what a jewel we live in. And with our military families, they often, once they live here for a while, a lot of them have a tendency to retire in our community, and we see their children grow and actually establish roots and families in our community. As I understand it, a lot of times the military will bring families to this region because of some of the benefits, some of the infrastructure we have, such as healthcare, and you mentioned that earlier. And with that, oftentimes we see military families with children with special needs come to our region. And next thing we know, our children grow, as we've all seen them, many of us in this room, they grow up to be adults, and they age out of our education system, which leaves them with limited services once they're an adult with special needs. And I know that's a wide range when we talk about special needs. But I believe this is an opportunity for the military, maybe, to be a partner with our communities in developing some of the needs for our adults with special needs population. they're no different than a lot of people in our community. They need, housing that we're all kind of competing for, as well as transportation and other services. So I look forward to maybe giving some contact information and this as a body here, look as a region on what we can do with adults with special needs. I know a lot of people who don't have, are fortunate enough, maybe it's fortunate, I don't know, not to have someone in their family with special needs, may think there's plenty of programs out there. And I would argue with you that there's a long line that you stand in to get into these programs, if you will. And all of them don't, it's not one size fits all. So I think it's a really good relationship, with the military, because those families are coming here. Like I said, a lot of them have children with special needs that eventually become adults and will need services. So look forward to talking more with you offline on this, and would open any kind of conversation ever with this kind of initiative, if you will. So thank y'all for your time.
Thank you, sir. Just these few comments kind of helps you understand the depth and breadth of scope that the Navy and our military face every day, the challenges. And so, again, I just encourage all of us to continue to support the work that our military does and the work that Mr. Schwartz does. So thank you very much for being here. Yes, sir, Mr. Crum.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, very quickly, Mr. Swartz, I had the chance to hear you speak before, and I thought this might be an item that if you could summarize for the commission. I know you have some civilian positions that you're having difficulty filling, and some of those numbers were quite surprising to me. I wonder if you might share that with the commission.
Yeah, so I think, one of the big topics, and thanks for that question as well, workforce and workforce challenges is a significant topic and interest item for me. Specifically, for example, in our shipyards today, we have about 300 open record positions for engineers. I'm talking about certified professional engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. Just to give you an example of some of those requisitions. So these are new hire engineering positions straight out of college, starting salary around $120,000 a year. And if you are a degreed professional mechanical engineer, we can offer an incentive up to a $30,000 recruitment incentive. And for an electrical engineer, we can increase that incentive up to a $50,000 recruitment incentive. And we're talking about brand new engineers. I have multiple open requisitions for those types of professionals, and it is extraordinarily hard to identify them and to hire them. It usually takes us about 4 or 5 recruitment efforts per individual recruitment to fill one of those positions, just because we cannot attract them to this region. I don't want to speculate why those types of individuals choose to go work somewhere else, but I would offer that a 22-year-old starting off at $120,000 with a $30,000 check to start is a pretty good living in Hampton Roads, and you can do a lot with that and have a number of those jobs open. I also have a number of industrial trade jobs in our shipyard that are also challenged in terms of making sure that we can get those filled. And with those jobs, I will give those individuals an apprenticeship and take them through schooling to get them to be high-performing experts in their fields. And not only do we provide them a path for a long career, we pay for the training pipeline to ensure that they could be highly proficient with a high-end welding career or electrician career coming out of those pipelines. And those jobs are open, and it's a real challenge to get them. I've posed questions to some of our senior academic institutions on, what can we do to partner better as our college students are graduating from our amazing universities. How do we keep them? And how do we keep them here? Because I have jobs for them. I would just love for them to choose to accept my job and stay in this region.
Well, and thank you very much. Just, was it last month or? Yeah, last month July, we gathered some young professionals to this very room and had a conversation about what it is about Hampton Roads that they like, what it is that they like to see, because we understand and recognize recruitment is a challenge for all of our industries, and thank you for pointing that out. So in a couple more agenda items, we're going to get a report on that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Okay, with that, we'll move on in the agenda to our regional legislative agenda. Mr. Crum.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start the regional legislative agenda, just one quick connection. And Mr. Swartz, thank you so much for being here again today and sharing that information. Our staff has had a great working relationship with our military partners. You've heard Ben McFarland at this podium talking about our joint land use studies. Whitney Catchmark talking about water resource collaboration with our military partners. Eric now, Wahlberg from our regional planning department getting into that space. So we really look forward to that continued partnership and cooperation, sir. So thank you so much. So before you today to present a proposed regional legislative agenda, and I will be asking for the commission's action on this today. It's I kid, it seems like we just finished the General Assembly session, and here we are. But we have over the last couple of years, a couple going back the last 8 years now, had the commission and the HRTPO board approve a regional legislative agenda that makes a unanimous statement on those issues we can all agree on are critical to be addressed on behalf of our region by the Virginia General Assembly, and in some cases by our federal delegation. A couple of years ago, Ms. McClellan, you will recall this, when you were the HRPDC chair, Ms. McClellan brought forth an idea, said, we're doing well, but why don't we form a regional legislative committee? And we've formalized that committee over the last about 5 to 6 years. Your regional legislative committee consists of the chairs of both the PDC board and the TPO board. It consists of your vice chairs of both boards and the chair and vice chair of the chief administrative officer committee. So you can see who those representatives are for you at this time. This is the regional legislative committee that's met 2 times over the last several months to form the regional legislative agenda, working with other community committees that provide advice to the PDC and TPO. And this committee has endorsed the ideas that you will be receiving today. Before we get into what those items are, just a couple things about the regional legislative agenda, because we don't want there to be any confusion. So our regional agenda is an umbrella, high-level regional legislative agenda. It is not in conflict with your local legislative priorities. You all have needs at your county level, at your city level, that are very specific to your localities, and you're going to have some very specific things that you're going to need to ask for. We're looking for a short list of regional priorities, and we have used the test of unanimous support to be on our regional legislative agenda to date. We find that when we go to Richmond and we're speaking in unison, that there's no fractures in that support, that is when we can be most successful. Our process we've been on, this is not all the meetings. I highlighted them in your agenda package, though. We've been in front of a number of groups, including our chief administrative officers and others, to get ideas about what the legislative priorities should be. And as you can imagine, we're turning the corner now. Now is the time for budget proposals. Now is the time for bill language to start to be formed and introduced, because General Assembly, beginning of January, will be here incredibly quick. Your legislative liaison currently is your executive director. What we tried to do carefully, because we have limited capacity, is be focused on those issues we identify. We can't boil the ocean. So what we've done with the help of the CAOs, they have helped us sort through items we should be championed versus items that are better championed by other entities. And what we have developed, and the CAOs helped us with this starting last year, is we make a short list of priority statements. Those are areas where the PDC will be out in front advocating for those items, but we'll also have some position statements that will monitor and support or monitor and oppose bills and budget amendments as they arise during the General Assembly. Okay, so let's jump into what the proposed, well, I'm sorry, one more thing before we do that. Today, I'll be asking for approval of the HRPDC. On October the 28th in this room, the Hampton Roads Caucus will convene and meet. We begin here at 8 a.m. on October the 28th. We run until 1 p.m. I should have the agenda finalized the beginning of next week. I will be circulating that to all members here. We are excited to have the chair of the HRPDC, Mayor Pons, and the chair of the HRTPO, Mr. McCarty. We'll be here to welcome the Hampton Roads Caucus, and then we will be discussing a couple of our selected legislative priorities. And then the whole day really represents different components of the community who will be coming into this room to share their request of the General Assembly. So if you can, please mark that calendar on your date. I know that's a long day, but even if you can stop in for a portion of that morning, I think you'll find that interesting. Our Transportation Board will consider their transportation priorities on November the 21st. But today, what we're going to have, and Marquet, can I ask, I know, can you increase the size of that for me, please? So at each of your places and at each of your places and included in the agenda was included a handout with your proposed regional legislative priorities. So this was in the agenda mailing that went out last week. You also have it in front of you. And Marquet, thank you, Marquet, a little bigger, that would be great. So if I can drive Marquet, that would be awesome here. And thank you, perfect. Okay, so we didn't want to put up a PowerPoint. There was a different format than what you had in front of you. So you've had this as a handout in your agenda. You also have it in front of you. And what I'd like to do is go through very quickly some of the priority asks that we're going to have heading into this General Assembly session. And the Regional Legislative Committee told me very clearly, Bob, start with a request for an increase of state funding for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. So here's our situation. We are formed by the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our Hampton Roads Planning District Commission received base funding in 2001 at a level of $366,000. Today, that number has been reduced to $190,000. What we found with some research is when the merger of the two PDCs happened, Peninsula and Southside, we lost a share. We merged two PDCs, but we only kept one share of funding from the state. What that results in, as many of you have told us, this is really an unfunded mandate, right? Because what we do is we come to you and you've been generous to us as local governments to help fill that void. So we would like to ask for that $190,000 back that we lost when the two PDCs were merged. And we'll be including that in our legislative ask. Mr. Chair, I'll go through all these and then we can pause and see if there's any questions and comments. From there, our next big category, probably no surprise, is flooding. Okay, and we have Whitney Catchmark here who can assist with any responses to questions. The first thing we want to ask under flooding is we want to ask the Virginia General Assembly to provide adequate funding through the Community Flood Prevention Program. The CFPF is used by local governments to do resilience planning, to do sea level rise planning and strategies, to set up programs, and even to fund small scale resilience projects. This is a program that Hampton Roads is winning in, right? 51% of the funds in a community flood prevention program, preparedness fund, come to Hampton Roads. But we're concerned that with the removal of Virginia from the RGGI program, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, that this program could be threatened. What we want to do is we want to keep $200 million per year in the CFPF. And we also want to see the majority of the CFPF be a grant program rather than a loan program that you have to pay back. So that is our second water priority. Thirdly, we are asking the help of the Virginia General Assembly to develop a state funding program to provide the non-federal match for federal grants to support large-scale flood relief projects. As you know, there's a lot of money flowing out of Washington, D.C. for flood mitigation. But here's the problem. When you get through the Army Corps studies and you follow that federally prescribed process, and it's time for you to go ask for federal funding for these grants, the federal government will fund 65%, but they need a 35% non-federal match. Okay, so let's use one city, our friends from the city of Norfolk. The city of Norfolk is looking at a $2.6 billion with a B project. They need $900 million of local match to unlock that federal money. Non-federal match, my apologies, non-federal match. That's correct. My apologies, thank you. Non-federal match, too many words today. And as you can imagine, Norfolk doesn't have that money. Ms. Bunning, you and I have spoken about the peninsula, and you have smaller cities on the peninsula. Raising that much of a non-federal match is going to be a significant issue as the localities get smaller. In Virginia Beach, you have your referendum, and you have that 500 million, but as you know, your costs continue to increase and federal assistance is going to be critical. This is an issue that's going to impact everybody around the table. So our request is that the Commonwealth of Virginia help us with the non-federal local match. Now, again, we talked about at CAOs. I had suggested a 50-50 split between the local governments and the state for the non-federal match. But some of our CAOs said, Bob, we probably don't, for some of our localities, it's going to be hard to even afford that 50% share of the non-federal match. So why is this an appropriate ask of the state? Well, first off, we are home to the Port of Virginia. The Port of Virginia supports the economy of all of the Commonwealth of Virginia. It supports the economy of everything east of the Mississippi River. Mr. Swartz today talked about the importance of our military here. I know the Navy is always going to be on the water, but you have places it's important to be dry and safe from water as well. And our investments to protect our military are important to our economy, but they're critical to our national security. So we think that there are cost avoidance opportunities for the Commonwealth by helping us bring this federal money. And we also think that there's a return on that investment. So we would like the Virginia General Assembly to help us with that non-federal match for federal grants. Moving on to the next item under flooding. We'd like to ask for state assistance to help us maintain and operate our regional flood sensor network across the Hampton Roads region. You've heard Whitney stand before you. Ms. Catchmark has talked about a pilot program where we've rolled out 20 flood sensors that have been installed around the region. They connect the ways and they help redirect you if you're going down the road and the roadways are flooded. We believe that so first off, I want to say we received tremendous response of that pilot program. Mr. Wheeler, you've talked about that just from in your city of Poquoson and others. Whitney's team's identified federal money. We can get more sensors. What we don't have money to do is maintain them, right? So we need to have some spares in the garage and we need to be able to have the money to maintain them. So we'd like to ask for some money from the Virginia General Assembly to assist us with that. And that, of course, is going to be helpful to everyone, all of our economic sectors, our military, et cetera. The next item under flooding relates to flood disclosure. Our current state statute is quite confusing and not very transparent. We would like to see the state enact state legislation that provides for the transparent disclosure of past flooding experiences during the real estate transaction process. There's language there now. It's not very clear. It's not very inclusive in terms of providing prospective buyers of property information on if the property has flooded in the past. Last session, Delegate Hernandez did carry a bill forward. It was passed over to this year. Whitney Catchmark served on a statewide committee that has some strategies in place, and we want to see the HRPDC get behind any legislation that helps clarify and provide some assistance to potential buyers of property relative to threats from flooding. I'll move quickly onto trails. In Hampton Roads, we have an emerging regional trail network that includes a number of incredible opportunities. First off, we have the Virginia Capitol Trail, 52 miles from downtown Richmond to the doorstep of Williamsburg in James City County. We have branded that trail, Trail 757. What we would like to do is take that 52-mile trail. We want to extend it the whole way to Fort Monroe on the peninsula, including a loop in Newport News that will connect to the shipbuilding area. Unanimous approval, localities all rowing in the same direction. We've got a number of funding applications that have been approved for sections of that trail. Then what we are doing is bringing that trail over the Surrey Ferry, bringing it down through Isle of Wight County, through Smithfield, down to Suffolk, where we get into the coastline trail, and we'll run the railroad right away via the Southampton Roads Trail, the whole way to the Virginia Beach Trail, connecting to the Elizabeth River Trail, and going the whole way to the ocean front. Sounds like a big vision and pipe dream, but Virginia Beach, congratulations. You brought in federal money to get that section built from Newtown Road the whole way to Virginia Beach Town Center. That includes a pedestrian overpass over Independence, which is critical. Chesapeake connects to this trail network with the Dismal Swamp Trail. If any of you have not been on the Dismal Swamp Trail, it's just an incredible trail that really is old Route 17. You'll ride your bike or walk down it, and it's a dedicated roadway for biking and walking. It's just a beautiful, beautiful opportunity. There's a short 3 miles that if we can get it funded, you connect to North Carolina. My point is this trail is really network is really starting to build out. We have some specific asks for specific sections of the trail. The trails that I mentioned that we would like to ask the Virginia General Assembly not to provide all the money, but to provide some of the money. Last year, Virginia provided $95 million in trail funding. We want some of that to come here to the Hampton Roads region. Offshore wind, Mr. Rubin's in the audience. You probably all get your Wednesday newsletter, but obviously we want to continue to support legislative efforts that turns that into our opportunities to be the hub for the supply chain for the offshore wind industry and to be able to capitalize on those job creation opportunities. In addition, you'll see with your handout and in the agenda mailing, we have regional position statements. They are around items such as housing, economic development site readiness, continued support for Jefferson Lab and a high-performance data facility, support for the Hampton Roads Sanitation District and their monitoring wells around their swift injection groundwater recharge area. A big one that we heard from CAOs and other partners was to protect local land use authority and ask the General Assembly to please respect that at the local level. Rejecting unfunded mandates, supporting actions that increase access to affordable and qualified childcare, and to consider amendments to the Virginia barrier crime statute that allows more individuals with past life experiences to serve as credible messengers and youth mentors. What we found through our violence prevention roundtable as we met with some of these grassroots groups is we have many people that have been through the judicial system, have paid their duties to society, and really have the opportunity to be effective mentors and messengers with our youth, but some of our Virginia laws provide some barriers to that. So that's an item that was brought up by our CAO committee. And then I'll just conclude with one additional item. And Ms. Bunning, I want to thank you for Mark Hay, could you please bring that down in size just a little bit? Appreciate your help there, Mark Hay. Ms. Bunning, thank you. We talked about this at the CAOs. The CAOs really felt that asking the state to continue to provide some flexibility for localities' use of speed cameras to promote public safety was an important statement and position statement to have on our regional legislative agenda. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for everybody's patience as I walk through that. Again, this was all included in your agenda mailing. I would ask PDC to consider taking action today to approve your 2025 regional legislative agenda. And sir, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Crum, and thank you for the presentation, but also thank you to the legislative committee that worked to craft this. And as Mr. Crum says, it's not an exhaustive list, but I think it's one that we all can agree and support. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the board members for questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to amplify something that Bob said. The item on the Virginia barrier crime statute was really an outgrowth of the regional violence conversations that Bob and others facilitated through the PDC. And we had a long list of things that we thought would help that were developed, and this is one of them. So I'm real glad and appreciative that it's here.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I also want to echo my thanks to the committee for their work. One item that I noticed was not included in either the policy statements, the position statements, or the priorities was restoration of education funding specifically for school construction and reconstruction. I know that there was state money historically coming from, I believe it was the lottery that went to localities for school construction and reconstruction, and that is I guess dried up or been redirected elsewhere. So with education being an economic development issue, and as much as it is, I would really like to see our region advocate for more funding for school construction, reconstruction.
Mr. Crum, do you have?
So our agenda, I defer to the commission members. If there is support, we certainly could add that statement to our regional agenda. We have in the past supported K-12 funding education for you all. Some of the members will recall that our HRPDC 1 year actually convened all of the local governments in the urban crescent from Washington, D.C. through Fredericksburg, Richmond, and Hampton Roads. And we all stood united on requests to the General Assembly of K-12 education funding. So it would be consistent with past years if you'd like to include that.
So, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. To Councilmember Schulman's point, as it relates to K through 12 education, I think something we should also consider for a regional position is workforce development with our education. Even our speaker today indicated to us that there's a number of positions available in certain trades that a lot of us have workforce development programs in our schools. And I know Chesapeake specifically is working to build a career center that could potentially be available to other cities to utilize way down the road. That's, very down the road. But if we could consider putting that in our regional position, that to support workforce development in our schools and communities, if there's grants or anything that may be available, I think that's consistent with what our organization is standing on.
So, Mr. Chairman, that is something we could coordinate with Sean Avery and the Workforce Council and draft that position statement. So I think those could be two friendly amendments to the legislative package as proposed, if it's okay with the commission.
Yeah, so I certainly would support, funding for K through 12 education. And as you point out, workforce development is certainly something that is very important, as Mr. Schwartz even talked about today. So I do believe it's something we should put into the legislative agenda. And so if everybody's in agreement, then we will do as Mr. Crum suggested and draft an amendment to this.
Yes.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve? Or are there any other comments?
Well, my question is, I suppose, are we going to do that today and vote on it? Or are we going to make the amendments, write up, redraft it, and then present it next meeting?
If I may make a suggestion, time is of the essence to start lining up with legislators. If I could get approval with the addition of those two items, what we could do is begin working with legislators here, and then I could have two position statements in your agenda next month on the two items we added, since they'll be position statements, and then you can look at that wording and make certain I capture that. If we could go that route, Mr. Chair, that would be helpful to staff.
So thank you for the question. I wonder if it's something that if the board is willing to allow the statements to be drafted and maybe the legislative legislative committee could look it over and approve it, and would that be acceptable, or Mayor Tucker?
I'm fine and prepared to make the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
So I move I guess we adopt the proposed 2025 regional legislative agenda with the proposed 2 amendments.
thank you, sir. Is there a second? Okay. We have a second. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, we'll go.
Yes, clarification on the 2.
Sir.
No, would you clarify, because I heard 3, and I am in support of the construction and reconstruction for schools and the addition to K through 12. So that's the 2 separate ones, or is there further?
The third one was support for workforce development programs and
So I was wondering, what 2 are we talking about?
so I was going to wrap in the construction and reconstruction of funding for K-12 schools in the one statement. And then would have that second statement that we will draft in cooperation with the Workforce Council relative to workforce.
Thank you, Ms. McClellan. McClellan.
I just wanted to clarify that it was for construction and reconstruction and not for K-12 generally.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Do you have a question?
Yeah, just a sidebar. Number of the mayors went to Germany a while ago, and we looked at internships and apprenticeship programs. And I think one of the big drawbacks that we have, not every child is destined for college, but they're desperate, for the trades. And but once again, the thing is that from what I understand, OSHA requirements right now inhibited, students from participating in apprenticeship programs. So it's maybe as a sidebar, they can look into that too.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, next, item 10 is public engagement. Mr. McLaren. Welcome.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for those of you who had to hear this presentation earlier, but I promise I'm going to be brief and get to the meat of things. All right, so we have our public engagement plan. Many of you may know this by a previous name, the Public Participation Plan. This provides a framework and an outline for us as a regional planning organization for how we engage with our public and ensure that they are involved in the regional planning process. This is so important and necessary to make sure that we have equitable and good planning for our region moving forward. Some of you may even recognize yourself in some of these pictures from previous engagement efforts. What's different from our previous plans to our current ones? So before we had 2 separate plans for the PDC and the TPO, and now we will have a joint plan together. We reviewed it to try and make sure that it's accessible and that we make our planning efforts accessible for our everyday residents in the region. They may not know much about like regional planning or what an HRPDC or an HRTPO is. So we wanted to make sure that we created a public engagement plan that would help introduce them to some of those different concepts and let them know which avenues to pursue to engage further. We also looked at best practices and the spectrum of public involvement and made sure to adopt that. And we wanted to look at what our current public engagement efforts. We live in a post-pandemic world. And so what really works today for engagement? Just a brief look, you can see this is our previous website. We've taken it from that to this, and you can see it's so much cleaner, so much easier to navigate. We also have so much more traction and engagement on our website. And then when you look at our social media, it's almost not even comparable. I mean, looking at just how much we have grown in our engagements on our PDC Facebook and on our TPO Facebook. Going back to earlier, um, if you haven't already, please make sure that you're following us on social media. That is where we post a lot of our latest updates. We also have a LinkedIn and a Nextdoor, which allows us to connect with our different community members via different channels. So we have some highlights listed there, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to list all of them. In short, have been trying very hard to make sure that we're getting out into the community and engaging with our residents and our community members and incorporating that into our planning processes. Some goals of our PEP or our public engagement plan. We want to make sure that we have good connection. As I mentioned, that it's accessible, that the feedback we receive is meaningful, and again, that we are inclusive. We're mindful of the historical impacts to disadvantaged and marginalized communities, and that we don't repeat those same harms from yesteryear. So how can you help, right? This is the meat of it. This is what I need your help with. The plan is going to go up live on our website this afternoon. If you could just make sure to review it, share it with your community-based organizers or organizations, your community organizers, public information officers, and involved residents in your various jurisdictions. That will help us so that we can get feedback from them and make sure that our public engagement plan aligns with how your communities engage and connect with local government and planning. And then provide that feedback to us by December 2nd. That'll be a 45-day public comment period where we'll be receiving input, incorporating those changes into the plan. And then I'll be meeting with different community stakeholders during that time. I'll come back in January and ask the board for your approval and adoption of that updated plan that incorporates that various feedback. Are there any questions for us at this time? Sorry, I ran through that kind of quick.
Thank you for the work that you've done to update all of the different social media outlets. And I would encourage you all to follow them yourselves and share them on your social media so that others can see the work that we're doing here at the PDC. Mr. Crum, anything else?
I just say that the other thing that we mentioned earlier today, not only you following, but if you could please share with your communities, your constituents, your neighborhood groups, neighborhood associations. And if any of you are having district meetings and would like to have somebody from the PDC come out and help us provide information to your constituents, please call on us. We're here to do that and to cooperate and support you. So thank you very much. And thank you, Quan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Quan. Okay, so as I mentioned in July, July, we had young professionals here, and today Mr. Grutendorf will be giving us an update on that.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I will just fly through this while they get my presentation up. I would just say Quan's doing a tremendous job of trying to get a lot of what we're doing out in the community. So the more support we can give them, the better we can do that. For those that weren't here in our July meeting, it was a fantastic meeting, incredibly engaging. We had young professionals from across the region join our board members. And what turned out to be, I think, from all accounts, just a really fun and interesting and a lot of discussions that we don't normally have. And essentially what we did is we asked 3 questions. What do you like most about Hampton Roads? What are our region's weaknesses? And what can we do to improve our region? And during the meeting, we had staff floating around the room. We also had PDC staff at the table. So following the meeting, immediately following the meeting, we had yet another meeting. It's fun for us. We met as staff in some 5-7 room and we talked about what we had heard. And so we went through all the things at various tables and conversations that took place. And we had 30 to 40 items per question that we went through. And then after that, Bob and I sat down with young professionals again that had participated, and we had 2 opportunities. One we met here, one was virtual, and we had young professionals join us. And what we asked them to do is go through the list that we had accumulated and start to talk about which of these prioritize, rise to the top, which of these things were most important to the young professionals and community that they wanted us to work on. So for each of the three questions, I'll take you through this. On the left-hand side in the bar chart, you'll see what the highest priorities are. I didn't include all 40 things, but here you can kind of see what it is. What do you like most about Hampton Roads? And this comes up again and again and again, right? We're a region surrounded by water. People love the water. So water and beaches, arts and culture was up there, quality of life, cost of living, and then soft amenities. There's a lot of soft amenities, and this relates back to quality of life. But when I go out and talk to groups across Hampton Roads, people love living here. Obviously, that's why we're here, but they really enjoy this region. They enjoy being part of it. Some of the other things, not too big, not too small, we're welcoming. There's a sense of community for everybody. So you can go to various parts of the region and find your own community. Diversity, demographic, geography, and third spaces. There's just diversity of what you can do, who you can do it with, and what area you can do it in. And then live music is something that's more up and coming. I know some of the localities are working hard at this, and the young professionals, I've got to tell you, this came up again and again. They want more of it, but they really appreciate it. We're not going to be Nashville anytime soon, but that was a big component. So then what are the region's weaknesses? This certainly came to the top, low starting salary. This has plagued our region for some time, and that was the top when we prioritize these. And you can imagine how low starting salaries mixed with high housing cost impacts young professionals. Several of them mentioned just the difficulty, right? You graduate, we have plenty of good colleges and universities here. You graduate, you can't stay here. You have to go home and live with your parents because you cannot afford to live here. And if by some reason you are able to live here, the starting salaries are so low, right? It's very difficult to get your own place. And we've heard this again and again and again. So low starting salaried coupled with affordable and accessible housing. Another one that came out a lot is we are unknown. And you hear this again and again as well. As a region, we're unknown. People don't know what to call us. People don't know how to describe the region. And this really hurts us, especially when we're trying to attract and recruit people into the area. One of the things that we had heard prior to the meeting is we had Nancy Gurdon from the Executive Roundtable come and present the Fahrenheit study, and they talked about outmigration in Hampton Roads. And then Nikki Johnson followed up with what's happening with some of the population. One of the things that we can do to stem the tide, the outflow, and bring more people in is to address one of these issues. So that came up again and again. The other one is local fragmentation, lack of upward opportunity. And here the term third spaces came again. And for those of you who don't know, a third space is you have your main two spaces, right? Your home and your place of work, those are your main two places. And a third space is a place that you can be, a place that you can socialize, a place that you can connect, but you don't necessarily have to pay to be there, like a restaurant or something like that. The beach is a great example of a third space, but where people in the community can go and connect. And you see this in some big metropolitan areas, but there's certainly a desire to have more of it here. We lack pride, we're missing a vibe, there's lack of cohesion, market awareness, those were some of the other things. Public transportation came up again and again, and prior to the PDC meeting, at the TPO meeting, public transportation was discussed quite a bit as well. The last question, what can we do to improve our region? Overwhelmingly, young professionals said regional marketing, regional marketing. This is one of those things. Mr. Carter was at my table, and I'll quote him what he said. He's like, we need to find out who we are and then tell people, right? And this is, to me, incredibly low-hanging fruit. We've just never done this, and it keeps coming up. But if we want to bring people into the region, then we really actually have to market the region, because when you look at the labor sheds, we're one massive labor shed. And again, nobody knows who we are. There's an image issue that we keep seeing, especially with folks in the military. We have this image that's not necessarily good, and if we want to address that image, we got to address it head on. So that was a recommendation. Connecting skills to workforce, back and forth. We seem to have a difficult time doing that. A lot of regions are trying to address this in unique ways, but trying to make that connection, and certainly the Workforce Council is trying to do that. It's getting increasingly difficult, it seems, to do this, but that's something that they want to work on. Spaces to connect, that's the third spaces again, trying to develop more of those third spaces. And then looking at regional ambassadors, you know, we're just hearing about the public engagement plan from Quan. And one of the things that's interesting when we talk to the young professionals is how they get their information, how they connect, who they're listening to is very different than how I did it. How my kids receive this is very different. And a lot of them look at regional ambassadors. If we can utilize regional ambassadors to lift our region up, to talk about our region, to talk about our localities in a way that is uplifting and beneficial, that could be a huge opportunity. Invest in the creative and artistic. I think some people have been hearing about this 1% for art. We can invest in the creative and artistic in a way, but we haven't done before, but we're certainly going to have to make that a priority. And that keeps people here, but it also attracts people here when they see something cool. Central depository of events, support public transportation. There's the idea of sister region that had people kind of excited, increasing density, and then re-energize our population centers. So future opportunities for engagement. This is kind of what we rounded out with and just reporting out on this. One of the things is getting young professionals involved with local government, right? A lot of what happens where young professionals are excited, it's not in the regional space. I'm going to be honest, you know, here I am at the PDC saying it's not in the regional space. It's actually at the local space. So connecting with local officials, staff, I think that's a huge, of huge importance to young professionals. They want to connect. Bringing young professionals together too across the region. This meeting that we had in July was the first time we had 6 young professional groups join us, and we had several that were unaffiliated, but it was the first time a lot of them had met, seen each other, and it was fantastic. We got some great pictures, but more than that, we started developing relationships and connections. And so they want to be working collectively, and they want community networking. And it doesn't happen necessarily unless we start doing things together like this. Again, this is the regional ambassadors, but connect with local influencers to really encourage and promote our region. They see this as a huge opportunity, I guess. This is a little bit beyond me. It's not my forte, but it seems to make sense because certainly that's who my kids would listen to. And then just a couple other points there. While we're doing things, especially in the public space, one of the opportunities is to really seek out generational diversity during decision-making process, right? If we want to attract a workforce in here, then we have to be including people who are in that workforce in that decision-making process, and of course, providing opportunities for inclusion. So that is what we heard back when we went through this whole process. Again, it was a phenomenal conversation. I wish we had more time to discuss it, but I certainly wanted to come back to you all and just tell you what we had heard, and I'd be happy to open the floor.
So I teach at a local university. I teach management and finance to a lot of young, impressionable young students. And I always tell them, and most of you parents might relate to this, is you want to get a return on investment in your education. So you don't want to major in 14th century medieval art history during the Baroque period. So again, you want to, get a return. And this program that you have would fit well for many of my students. And I'm gonna have them. If you can send me a copy of your presentation, I'm going to send it to them to all of my classes. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Bob and I also stress to the young professionals, in this organization we are connected through the community in many ways. And if they want to learn more, we're happy to go to them. The PDC is happy to go to where the young professionals are and talk about these issues. But I'd be happy to come talk to your class, for instance, on these issues and generate that conversation.
Come by after the meeting and get your card.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just had a comment. If you
will share that with everybody.
Yes,
full commission will be
the,
good.
yes, the presentation will be made available to everybody. I'll get that out there.
Thank you.
But it seems to me there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. How does this body address some of that and create opportunities, or is it really a function of this organization, or what are your recommendations?
Well, I think there's several groups that are out there trying to address some of the low-hanging fruit, as you say. The reality is, how do we do that? It all comes down to resources, and that's where certainly things get tough. I think having these conversations that are currently going around the community and supporting efforts that are taking place is really important. But I think, coming back to the regional marketing message, I mean, we've been talking about this for as long as I've been here, 23 years, right? That regional marketing component. Some regions do it well, and some regions don't do it well. And that's one of those discussions that, I'm not always certain that government's a place to have those discussions. Some of this is more grassroots, but I think supporting efforts and making the connections where we can, to address certainly when we look at how this region is perceived, the perception of the region, if we don't address that, we're not going to fix it. So I think having an honest conversation about how do we address those issues of perception, and how do we market ourselves so that, people recognize this region as a place that's worth coming to, that's worth finding a job at. One of I'll just touch on this one last thing. One of the issues that we talked with a delegate recently, and she was saying, she was speaking to a urologist who was trying to market Hampton Roads in order to bring urologists into the area. Well, we shouldn't have urologists marketing Hampton Roads, right? We should have urologists practicing urology, but we don't have a mechanism with which to say, hey, come get employed in this region because we have phenomenal assets. We have an incredible quality of life. We've got beaches, we've got history, we've got an amazing region that you can live in. We don't do that well. So one of the things we could do is really find a way to promote this and make this about attracting and retaining talent through marketing in a capacity that really resonates with all.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just had one, I think, sitting next to my colleague who might be one of the younger electeds in the region.
She and I are the youngest.
Yeah. So an
Good point.
idea that we thought of was maybe where the PDC could coordinate perhaps a task force of young electeds or a subcommittee of young electeds. I think that might be the role of the PDC here. Ms. Royster has attempted to do that sort of loosely, but doesn't have the resources that the PDC could perhaps to pull that together and maybe ask them for advice on how to. So I'm speaking for you. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yes, thank you, Andrea. Because I think one of the things is when I'm because I am a part of this group, I'm 35 years old. And so when I'm having conversations, number one, the first thing is people talk about young people and they don't recognize that millennials are actually your working bodies of persons who are in the labor market right now. We're not Gen Zs. We're actually those who are in the workforce, raising families, looking at where we want to move based off of the schools, based off of sectors that are available for us and other things. And ultimately, a lot of the conversations that are had, they're had in a bubble where it's more about we're reacting to what we've heard versus bringing those to the table. And I think also another thing that we're experiencing, particularly in localities, even a shift in your voting demographics, where your younger people are now some of the targeted parents who you're talking to. And a lot of those persons are also in positions where they're serving on commissions and boards and even running for office. So we're not including them in the conversations as we discuss retention and acquisition of talent here at Hampton Roads. And that also includes the elected bodies who represent those. I think we're doing a disservice as it relates to planning for a future, and you're not including the future you want to plan for.
Good point. Thank you. And we are not the same age, clearly. Thank you for those comments. Yes, sir.
I would respectfully second the notion of putting together a a task force or committee of, I'm not 35 anymore, but I can still run, walk and chew gum at the same time. So I'm happy to join in that initiative.
So I have a chair and a vice chair.
Well,
Ms. Royster and Mr. Schulman here.
If I could just make a comment, because also I know, I believe it was yesterday evening, they just had the Inside Business Top 40 Under 40. Last year, I was a recipient. And one of the common denominators when they asked us on the questionnaire, and you can go back and read it, and they said, what are the one thing in Hampton Roads that you feel is lacking? A lot of the things that we're discussing or that came out of that pilot article have been repetitive over the last 5 years of Inside Business having these interviews with young persons. I personally have asked Inside Business if they could go back and look and find out how many of those top 40 under 40s even still live in the region, and then why did they leave? Because I think that that's something that you acknowledge when we acknowledge, oh, we have this class of top 40 under 40s. What can we do to keep you here? Versus, wow, that person was great. Do they still live here? No, they moved to Texas. No, they're in Charlotte. No, they're in DC. And I think that's also a great base group to also start engaging, because these are persons who we've highlighted as the up and coming movers and shakers here in Hampton Roads in their various fields of professionalism as well.
Well, there's at least one alum here, so thank you. Okay, so I don't know if we want, ready to establish a subcommittee, but I think staff will continue to have conversations about how to move this agenda forward. Okay, Mr. Crum, would you like to walk us through the next couple items?
Yes, you have some items in your agenda, your advisory committee meeting minutes, technical committee meeting minutes, some correspondence for your information. Mr. Chairman, our next commission meeting will be next month in November. That's all we have for you today.
Okay. Any old or new business? Okay. Seeing none, we will adjourn.